Today marks 100 years since a legendary discovery of King Tut's tomb. Our Kelly Kobiea has more on what's still being discovered in the desert sand a century later.
What comes to your mind when you hear of tombs? Don't be scared, because in this video, we will tell you about a discovery that would change the course of history forever. Archaeologists have just discovered a tomb that looks like it's never been affected by time and nature, said to be 800,000 years old. How interesting. As they brushed the dirt and debris that covered the entrance away, they found a tomb housing an unknown king still adorned with jewels and treasures. How is this even possible? And what kind of tomb is this? Keep watching to find out. Ancient Egypt is one of human history's most intriguing and suspense-filled strides. It is a place filled with many mysterious and fascinating sights and artifacts and holds great historical relevance in the history of mankind. One of the main reasons is that accounts of life in ancient Egypt conjure grand images. Wealthy and powerful kings and queens, enormous breathtaking buildings, endless piles of gold, and mythical gods. These things are the essence of all the adventure tales and fantasies we have heard. Glorified tales capture our imagination when they are fiction, but the fact that these things existed in history adds to the appeal. One reason people may seem so interested in ancient Egypt is that humans are fascinated with discovery and the unknown. Stories like Howard Carter's discovery of King Tut's tomb resonate with us today because we can feel that sense of excitement when we learn about him opening the tomb. When people think about discovery and archaeology, they think about ancient Egypt. Egypt has yielded countless amazing finds and is the quintessential example of the excitement of archaeological exploration. That sense of anticipation before discovery is exciting to people and is part of the reason people are so interested in archaeology in general. More so, humans have a natural interest in the past. We want to understand the past because it contributes to our understanding of the present. A way of honoring and remembering the past is to incorporate it into our present life, which we are doing by bringing Egyptian themes into the present day. Recently, archaeologists have made yet another shocking discovery in Egypt. They discovered an 800,000-year-old tomb of an unknown king. This tomb was said to have been lost in time and has been long forgotten without traces. What's more shocking is the things discovered inside this ancient tomb that have defiled both time and elements to remain in shape and absolutely pristine. The things discovered in the tomb will shock you and let you in on what Egyptian history has to offer. Promise me you won't be scared. So what are they? One particularly interesting mummy and its equally famous linen wrapping, the Liber Linus, Latin for linen book, eventually found its way into the Archaeological Museum in Zagreb, Croatia. How did this happen? In 1848, a Croatian official in the Hungarian royal chancellery by the name of Mihailo Barek resigned from his post and decided to do some traveling. While he was in Alexandria, Egypt, Barek decided to buy a souvenir, leading to his purchase of a casket containing a female mummy. When Barek returned to his home in Vienna, Austria, he displayed the mummy by putting her in the corner of his sitting room in an upright position. Barek removed the linen wrapping from his mummy and displayed it in a separate glass case. 1859, Barek died, and his brother Elijah, a priest living in Slavonia, inherited the mummy. As Elijah had no interest in mummies, he donated her to the State Institute of Croatia, Slavonia, and Dalmatia, now known as the Archaeological Museum of Zagreb, in 1867. Before now, nobody had noticed the writing on the mummy's linen wrapping. It was only when the mummy was examined in 1867 by the German Egyptologist Heinrich Brugsch that they noticed the writing. Believing it to be Egyptian hieroglyphs, however, Brugsch did not investigate further. In 1891, the Liber Linus were sent to Vienna and were thoroughly examined by Jacob Krall, an expert on the Coptic language. Initially, Krall had expected that the language of the text was Coptic, Carian, or Libyan. Upon closer inspection, however, Krall established that the text was written in Etruscan. While he could reassemble the strips in their proper order, Krall could not translate the text. But what was an Etruscan book of rituals doing on an Egyptian mummy? One suggestion is that the deceased was a wealthy Etruscan who fled to Egypt, perhaps sometime during the 3rd century BC. The Liber Linus has been dated to this period. Or later, as the Romans were annexing Etruscan territory. As was the norm with other rich foreigners who died in Egypt, the young woman was embalmed before her burial. The presence of the Liber Linus may be explained as a memorial left for the dead as part of the Etruscan burial custom. Ancient mummies with golden tongues. You would probably be wondering how mummies could have golden tongues. Well, it appears that at some point during the embalming process, the tongues were removed and replaced with pieces of gold foil shaped to resemble a human tongue. It is believed that this practice was carried out to help the dead speak before the court of Osiris, the Egyptian god of the underworld and judge of the dead. These mummies were said to have been poorly preserved and were found in the Kouaisna cemetery about 40 miles south of Cairo in Egypt, the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities said. Those mummies were about 2,500 and about 2,000 years old, respectively. How strange. Let's continue. The Golden Boy Mummy. When a teenage boy died 2,300 years ago in Egypt, he was mummified and adorned with 49 protective amulets and a golden mask to guide him in the afterlife. Researchers discovered the amulets placed on and inside the mummified Golden Boy body when they used computerized tomography scans to digitally unwrap the remains without disturbing them. The Golden Boy's remains were stored inside 2 nested coffins. The outer coffin was plain and inscribed with Greek letters, while the inner wooden sarcophagus bore patterns and a gilded face. When researchers scanned the mummy, they spotted 49 amulets with 21 different designs, including a golden tongue placed inside the mouth and a golden heart scarab located in the chest, which ancient Egyptians believed could aid in the transition to the afterlife. The young man, thought to have been between 14 and 15 years old, also wore a gilded head mask inlaid with stones and a protective covering called a cartonnage across his torso. All of his organs had been removed, except for his heart, and his brain was replaced with resin. Moving forward is the strange screaming mummy. According to reports, the screaming mummy was first discovered in 1881. Believed to have once been a princess, she lay in the royal cachette of Deir el-Bahari, where 21st and 22nd dynasty priests had hidden the mummified bodies of deceased royals so grave robbers would never find them. The popular Egyptologist Zahi Hawass and Cairo University professor of radiology, Sahar Salim, have recently re-examined the 3,000-year-old mummy. Hawass has deemed the cause of death for the woman to be atherosclerosis of the coronary arteries that struck her with a sudden and fatal heart attack. But did she die screaming? What's the truth? In a recent discovery, archaeologists think they have solved the mystery of the screaming mummy, an ancient Egyptian corpse preserved with its mouth open in a silent scream. The identity of the body found in the Deir el-Bahari tomb complex in Egypt has long eluded researchers. However, a recent DNA analysis of the remains suggests they belong to Prince Pentawere, a son of the pharaoh Ramses III, who was involved in a conspiracy to murder his father. Historical records indicate that the prince was sentenced to be hanged as a result of his betrayal, and marks around the neck of the screaming mummy appear to confirm this account. The remains are considered strange because they are not, in fact, properly mummified, despite being buried near the mummies of royalty. The discovery of a 2,600-year-old cheese in an Egyptian tomb has left many jaw-dropped as this ancient artifact remained untouched. Archaeologists have mysteriously unearthed the remains of a 2,600-year-old cheese in an ancient Egyptian tomb. The cheese was found inside pottery excavated at the vast Saqqara necropolis near Cairo. The expedition found molds of halloumi, as it was called, inside large vessels, which date back to the 26th and 27th Egyptian dynasties, 664. Dr. Mustafa Waziri, the Secretary General of the Supreme Council of Archaeology, who was in charge of the expedition, says that ancient Egyptians used to refer to the cheese as haram. This was said to be the evidence of cheese-making in ancient Egypt that dates back to 5,000 years. Would you like a taste of this strange cheese? Also discovered was the senet or senet, an ancient Egyptian board game that consists of 10 or more pawns on a 30-square playing board. The earliest representation of Senate is dated to 2620 BCE from the mastaba of Hiziri, while similar boards and hieroglyphic signs are found even earlier, including in the Levant in the early Bronze Age II period. Even though the game has a 2,000-year history in Egypt, there appears to be very little variation in key components. This can be determined by studying the various Senate boards found by archaeologists and depictions of Senate being played throughout Egyptian history on places like tomb walls and papyrus scrolls. However, the game fell out of use following the Roman period, and its original rules are the subject of conjecture. Let's look at the mysterious Egyptian head cones. But how do archaeologists solve the mystery of the ancient Egyptian head cones? Head cones, also known as perfume cones or wax cones, were a type of conical ornament worn atop the head in ancient Egypt. They are often depicted on paintings and bas-reliefs of the era, but were not found as archaeological evidence until 2019. Researchers have long speculated about the purpose and meaning of pointy head cones in Egyptian art. But while the head cones were relatively common in Egyptian art for over 1,000 years, their purpose and existence remain a mystery. It took scholars nearly a decade to secure funding and complete a substantial examination of the head cones, giving them a chance to test another popular theory about the unusual objects. The head cones were solid lumps of perfumed fat that melted over the heads of their wearers and acted as a sort of ancient, fragranced hair gel. However, given the artistic associations of the objects with childbirth and that at least one of the specimens was an adult woman, the team scholars suggest the cones had something to do with fertility. However, the fact that they were found in a non-elite cemetery makes it difficult to interpret their meaning. It is also asserted that the people depicted wearing the head cone were mostly elite, though some servants may have had it too. Whatever the case, these head cones were a thing to be owned by the elites. But what do you think of a tomb full of snacks? Imagine all your favorite dishes found in a tomb. It is quite bizarre. So archaeologists have discovered an ancient Egyptian tomb full of snacks. Professor Salima Ikram, an Egyptologist and a leading scholar in Egyptian funerary archaeology, presents some of the young pharaoh's preserved foods, including meat, poultry, and dates that have the seeds removed. Consequently, it appears that they want a better afterlife. So, the elaborate preparations for eternity seen in the tombs ensured that everyone would have a great time. In royal and non-royal tombs, you get a lot of everyday items, all kinds of furniture, beds, and chairs. There'd also be jewelry, clothes, makeup, food, wine, and beer. There have been speculations about comparing the artifacts from this Egyptian tomb to Indian carvings, signifying cross-cultural similarities between the two countries. But what do Egypt and India share in common? Or why are the artifacts compared to Indian carvings? India and Egypt, two of the world's oldest civilizations, have enjoyed a history of close contact from ancient times. Both countries had ancient civilizations, and both civilizations were based on religion and the belief in life after death, or with a similar approach. Animals were sacred in both religions as well. The Maulana Azad Center for Indian Culture, MATSIC, was set up in Cairo in 1992 to promote cultural cooperation between the two countries by implementing the Cultural Exchange Program, CEP. The center, in addition to popularizing Indian culture through Hindi, Urdu, yoga and meditation classes, dance classes, seminars, and exhibitions, also organizes cultural festivals. The India by the Nile, IBN, annual cultural festival has emerged as the largest foreign festival in Egypt. IBN 2015 was inaugurated by Amitabh Bachchan and included Manipuri folk dance, crafts exhibition, yoga and Ayurveda, Bollywood musical, Indian fusion music, street food festival, screening of films, a writer's workshop, and several other events conceived and organized on the principle of public-private partnership. Indian cultural groups have also participated in the International Festival for Drums and Traditional Arts, the Samaya International Festival for Chanting and Spiritual Music, and the International Festival for Art and Culture. In its outreach activities, the Indian Cultural Center also organizes India Day in Egyptian governorates and universities. Yoga has gained popularity in Egypt, with 14 schools in Cairo and centers in other cities. The International Day of Yoga was celebrated with enthusiasm. The strong ties between India and Egypt are evident from the affection towards India amongst the population. 3 streets in Cairo are named after Indian leaders: Mahatma Gandhi, Pandit Nehru, and Dr. Zakir Hussain. Mahatma Gandhi has 2 busts, one in Cairo at the Supreme Council of Culture and the other in Alexandria at the Bibliotheca Alexandria. It is no news that Egypt and India share certain similarities and uphold similar truths, one of which is the importance of religion in both cultures. In ancient Egypt, religion was integral to everyday life, and the pharaohs were considered divine beings. Similarly, in ancient India, religion was a central aspect of life, and many of the country's most important architectural and artistic achievements are tied to religious themes and symbolism. Massive stone structures and monumental architecture are also used. In Egypt, the pyramids and the Great Sphinx of Giza are impressive testaments to the country's architectural prowess. Similarly, in India, massive structures like the Great Stupa at Sanchi, the rock-cut temples of Ellora and Ajanta, and the ancient city of Mohenjo-Daro are evidence of the country's architectural achievements. Consequently, the art of both cultures also shares some similarities, such as the use of intricate carvings and patterns. For example, ancient Egyptian art was often highly stylized and used images of animals and gods. At the same time, ancient Indian art also used religious imagery, such as the intricate carvings of Hindu deities on temples and the Ajanta cave paintings. More interestingly, both cultures have a rich tradition of storytelling and mythology, with epic tales like the Ramayana and Mahabharata in India, and the myths of the gods and goddesses of Egypt, including Isis, Osiris, and Horus. There is no doubt that ancient Egypt and India were closely similar and share certain similarities, so you see the reason for the speculations and theories concerning the artifacts found in the tomb. The discovery of the 8,000-year-old tomb has sparked curiosity in many people to know about the true age of civilizations starting from Egypt. Talking about the age of civilizations, ancient historians Berossos and Manetho have played a key in dissecting this topic. Berossos and Manetho were ancient historians who provided alternative perspectives on the age and history of civilizations like Sumer and Egypt. Berossos was a Babylonian priest and historian who lived around the 3rd century BC. Berossos wrote a work known as the Babylonian, a history of Babylonia that encompassed the world's creation up to his time. He presented accounts of incredibly long reigns of kings and an extensive timeline that deviates significantly from conventional historical views. His chronicles suggested a far older history for Mesopotamian civilizations, proposing dates back hundreds of thousands of years. On the other hand, Manetho was an Egyptian priest and historian who lived during the 3rd century BC. Manetho compiled the Egyptiaca, or History of Egypt. He wrote the history of Egypt in Greek. His work included a sequential account of the Egyptian pharaohs organized into dynasties. We rely on the history of Egypt written by Manetho in the 3rd century, who had access to many sources, and he divided the kings into the 30 dynasties we use today. Like Berossos, Manetho's chronicles presented timelines that vastly differed from the conventional understanding of Egyptian history. He mentioned rulers and dynasties that, according to traditional scholarship, would imply an incredibly ancient age for Egypt. Worthy to note is the fact that both Berossos and Manetho challenged the conventional timelines of their respective civilizations, suggesting much longer histories than what was commonly accepted by later historians and scholars. Their works remain valuable, although their specific chronologies have faced scrutiny and mistrust due to the absence of direct corroborating evidence from contemporary sources. However, their writings inspire debate and exploration into alternative views of ancient history. What do you think about the findings in the tomb? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more.